Computer. Okay, so though I advertised yesterday in the shul listserv message that the topic today would be to be determined, I realized that last week I had talked about that we would, because Jules, I believe, brought it up. What about this electricity for the ultra-Orthodox in Israel? And though it sounds like a trivial topic, I think that it's worth talking about for a little bit in terms of the influence of the ultra-Orthodox on Israeli politics. Okay, so there's this article. I'm going to share my screen. That was in the Times of Israel. I'm going to make it as big as possible to get rid of as many ads as possible from the screen. And okay, just a couple people have entered, and just welcome everybody to Jews in the News today. So I wanted to talk about this article today from the Times of Israel, dated 9 days ago. Government, that is the Israeli government, set to discuss controversial kosher electricity plans on Sunday. So I'm not sure if they did discuss it, because the rockets from Gaza took over everything the past several days, and ceasefire is in force. So thank God for that. But this is before that Gaza operation began. So what is this talking about? So let's go down here. Government ministers are slated to discuss on Sunday controversial plans to build electricity storage sites aimed to be used by ultra-Orthodox Jews, many of whom are uncomfortable with the production and delivery of electricity on Shabbat, Channel 12 News reported. So before we go on, just want to stop there with understanding, wait a second, how can electricity be used on Shabbat at all by ultra-Orthodox Jews? So the idea is this. So the Mishnah and the Talmud had no idea what electricity was, right? So when the Mishnah and then the Talmud discuss work on Shabbat, the Mishnah derived 39 categories of work that are prohibited on Shabbat based on the fourth commandment, which says, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. You shall not do any work on the Sabbath. Okay, so that's what the fourth commandment says. So since it's the fourth of the 10 commandments, one thinks that it is a foundational Jewish principle, that Shabbat is integral to what it means to be Jewish. And since normative Judaism follows Jewish law, then Sabbath observance is integral in what it means to be Jewish. I apologize for what's happening on the screen. It's these pop-up ads, which I have no control over. So Sabbath observance is integral. Not working on Shabbat is a foundational principle of what it means to be Jewish. The Sabbath day, the Saturday being Shabbat, is just as integral as keeping kosher and believing in one God and other principles like that. Okay, so the 39 categories of work are from which. Okay, one more element of this. Since the commandment says not to work on the Sabbath day, the Torah itself does not tell us what kind of work we're supposed to be resting from. We have two examples in the Torah itself. one person who was gathering sticks on Shabbat and then was brought to Moses to determine what to do with him. And the Torah does say not to kindle a flame and keep it burning during the Sabbath. Okay, so lighting a fire and gathering sticks are two forms of work that the Torah tells us specifically. And there are then 37 other categories that the rabbis derive, and they do it based on the fact that one of the commandments to observe the Sabbath is given during the details of the construction of the desert sanctuary. So because the law of Sabbath is incorporated in the details of the laws of how to build the sanctuary and then the actual building of the sanctuary, the rabbis then said, oh, all the work then that is forbidden on Shabbat is work that's involved in building the sanctuary. That's the kind of work that we're supposed to refrain from. Okay, so all of the work is creative in as one way to explain the kind of work that it is. In other words, it's work for the sake of achieving a task, as opposed to work that is just schlepping, or not necessarily you're achieving something by doing this work. It's just considered work. So I don't want to get into too much detail about these categories of work, but the idea is, how does electricity come into play with it being considered work on Shabbat or not? Okay, so the idea is that for most traditional Jews, the use of electricity is forbidden on Shabbat because by flipping a switch, one is creating a circuit or opening a circuit, that is, by turning the light on, by flipping the switch, one is completing a circuit. And by completing a circuit, it's understood by traditional sources that you've just created something that wasn't there before. And then the opposite would be true too. If the lights were on already on Shabbat, flipping the switch to turn the lights off would also be forbidden. The same idea with lighting a fire. You're not allowed to kindle a match. You're not allowed to light a match, light any kind of fire. And if a fire is burning already on Shabbat, you're not allowed to extinguish the fire on Shabbat. Okay, so there are two ideas here about understanding electricity, since electricity was not even imagined by the rabbis 2,000 years ago. So is electricity fire or is electricity a circuit? Okay, so there are some in the non-Orthodox halachic world, by that I mean in the conservative movement, who say that the use of electricity on Shabbat is okay, that completing a circuit is not really work. It's kind of like turning on the water that's in the faucet, right? So if you turn on water, like turn the knob on the faucet, water is already flowing through the pipes. It's just not flowing through your sink until you turn the faucet on. And then you stop the water flowing in your sink by turning the faucet off. Ultra-Orthodox Jews use water from their pipes on Shabbat. So for non-Orthodox, the idea of flipping a switch is the same as turning the faucet. So the electricity is already in the circuit. Flipping the switch is like turning the knob, and you're allowing the electricity to flow just as you allow the water to flow. But then still, so that's one answer to the use of electricity on Shabbat among the non-Orthodox. The other is, but still, most of the electricity that we use serves the same purpose as fire. In other words, if we flip the switch to turn on a light in the room, it's the same as if we were lighting a candle in the days before electricity to create light in the room. And since you can't light a candle or light fire in the fireplace to create light in the room on Shabbat, you shouldn't be able to turn on the lights, because the lights are serving the same purpose as fire. Okay, so as opposed to turning on your electric oven to want to cook something or to warm something on Shabbat. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbat, but you are allowed, if you keep the fire burning on Shabbat, you are allowed to keep food warm on Shabbat. You can't bring food to a boil, but you can keep it warm on Shabbat. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more nuanced. So I use electricity in my home on Shabbat. I turn on lights on Shabbat. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't use electrical appliances on Shabbat. Okay, so I will not turn on my electric oven on Shabbat. I'll turn it on before Shabbat, keep it on all of Shabbat on a low temperature. And there is something, electrical appliances today have something known as a Sabbath mode. So, there is such a thing. You look at the instruction manual for your electric oven or anything like that. Ovens, by design, if you leave an oven on, it will turn off after 12 hours automatically. But you can override that in something called Sabbath mode. Okay, so you can keep an oven on and it won't go off automatically. All right, you can keep it on as long as you want. It's built in to turn off automatically, just to, as a safety feature and to save electricity. But you can override it in what's called Sabbath mode. So that's what we do in our home. We turn the oven on before Shabbat starts, before candle lighting, and leave it at this low temperature, 170, 180. And we leave it on like that all of Shabbat, and put food in the oven, planning out the timing accordingly so that the food stays hot for Shabbat. And when it's Yom Tov leading into Shabbat, you are allowed to cook on the holiday, but you're still not allowed to light a fire on a holiday. You can transfer a flame, you can adjust a flame, but you can't light a flame from scratch on a holiday. So what we do is we adjust the temperature in the oven if Lenora wants to cook something on the holiday. So like Shavuot is coming. Shavuot is a Thursday night, Friday, and Shabbat. So on Friday, you can cook. On Shabbat, you can't. So you can adjust the temperature of the oven on Yom Tov, but you can't adjust it on Shabbat. Okay, so I'm saying too much, except that for our purposes of electricity on Shabbat within the conservative movement, within the bounds of the discussion of the Teshuvah or the Teshuvot about electricity on Shabbat within the conservative movement, I turn on lights on Shabbat because I don't think that flipping a switch is like lighting a fire. I think it's totally different. And to me, it's like turning the faucet for the water from the sink. So I will turn on lights on Shabbat, but I will not use my microwave oven or my electric oven. I won't turn on the electric oven, turn it on. Won't use a dishwasher, things like that on Shabbat. Okay, now there are Orthodox Jews who don't use electricity. What do they do when they open the refrigerator and the light goes on? Right? So you're not intending a light to go on when you open the refrigerator, it just goes on. So Orthodox Jews will unscrew the light bulb in the refrigerator so that they're not lighting the light. Now, also, when you open the refrigerator, depending on how long you keep the refrigerator open, you're causing the motor then to kick in to then cool the contents of the refrigerator. So the more orthodox you are, the less likely you are to open your refrigerator because, again, the thermostat will kick in and you will indirectly be causing the motor to turn on when you open your refrigerator and take something out of it. Okay, so if it's doing it by itself while the door is closed, then that's doing it by itself, and you have nothing to do with that. But if you're opening the door and taking food out contributes to the motor kicking in, then you have to be careful about that. It's also, that would also be the case with your hot water heater, so that when you take a shower on Shabbat, nothing wrong with using water on Shabbat, but using hot water on Shabbat, some ultra-Orthodox will not take a shower on Shabbat because the fact that they're running the hot water means that they're emptying the tank. And by emptying the tank, other water, not hot, is going into the tank, which will then affect the temperature of the hot water tank, the hot water heater, which will then cause the gas or electric burner to turn on to heat the water. So though your intention is not to light that fire under your hot water heater, whether you have a gas one or an electric one, you are indirectly doing that by taking a shower. So there are some Orthodox who will not take a shower on Shabbat because of that indirect use of electricity. Okay, so I'm laughing because I see Jules shaking his head, like unbelievable. Okay, so a part of me agrees with you, Jules, unbelievable. Another part of me says, well, this is the nature of having a Jewish legal system, right? And Jules, as a lawyer, you should appreciate the ins and outs of law. So the difference is it's the ins and outs of law that is religious law, right? So how is taking a shower, knowing that you're indirectly then causing a burner to light on Shabbat, helping you to enhance your Sabbath observance? That's the question we should be asking. Jewish law should always be about enhancing our connection to God. That's what the Jewish legal system is supposed to do. It's supposed to enhance, provides us opportunities to understand who we are as a person, who we are as a Jew, and how what we do can always and should always help us appreciate our relationship to God. That's the underlying principle of the Jewish legal system, right? So every religion is about enhancing a relationship with God. Judaism is about that and providing 613 mitzvot, 613 opportunities to exhibit our love and devotion to God. Okay, so yes, I would agree that whether we take a shower on Shabbat or not, and the fact that the hot water heater turns on eventually by using up the hot water when we take a shower, does that affect our enhancement of Shabbat? So for me personally, an indirect cause of a fire going on is not enough of a reason for me not to take a shower. I think enough of a reason for me to take a shower is the fact that I'm your rabbi and I am standing on the bima and also fraternizing at Kiddush, and you want to be able to be close to me and not repulsed. So I need to take a shower on Shabbat in order to be clean and to enhance my observance of Shabbat. I think being clean enhances one's observance of Shabbat. So, but again, I'm not an ultra-Orthodox Jew. So now, back to this article here. again, for those who came in after I started, this article is from Times of Israel, May 6th. The Israeli government set to discuss controversial kosher electricity plans. So now, how do you, here's another thing that would cause some of us to shake our heads. The idea that there are loopholes that are found within the legal system. Okay, so there are loopholes in American law. There are loopholes in the tax code. There's loopholes in Jewish law, right? The most famous of all the loopholes is regarding Passover, in where we're supposed to get rid of our chametz, but if we sell our chametz, then we don't have to get rid of it because it's not ours anymore. Okay, so we all abide by that loophole. And when all of you use me as your agent to sell your chametz so that you can keep it stored away and you don't have to get rid of it before Passover. And by selling it, you then can use it again after Passover is over. So it's an economic consideration for that loophole. And there are other loopholes. One loophole being, what if I had a timer set up with my light switch, or a timer set up, or any other electrical device like my television? Okay, so I don't watch television on Shabbat, not because I don't use electricity on Shabbat, but more for the sense of taking away from my enhancement of Shabbat, right? So that it's a distraction. It's not really within the celebratory nature of a spiritual kind of day. Okay, so there's that. But what if, if the Philadelphia 76ers were a better basketball team, and the seventh game was not yesterday, but was on Shabbat, and I wanted to watch the seventh game so that in my fantasy world, the 76ers would have won that game? I could theoretically, I could put a timer on. I could do two things. I could either leave the television on all of Shabbat, or depending on this, I'm not sure, with cable box systems and all of that, and all the different remotes you have to use to turn on your TV. Theoretically, if you could turn on your TV with a timer, then that could be possible too. In other words, you set a timer. This is what I do with my coffee maker, right? So most coffee makers have a program mode to it so that you can set it the night before or the day before, right? So I set my coffee maker. I put the coffee in, put the water in, and set it to turn on at 6:30 in the morning on Shabbat morning. Okay, so I haven't turned it on Shabbat. I've intended for it to turn on Shabbat, but my intention happened on Friday afternoon when I set up the coffee maker. So because even though it's turning on Shabbat, I didn't turn it on Shabbat physically. I intended for it to turn on Friday afternoon when it was okay to use electricity. So, Saul.
What if you had a maid who was not Jewish? Could they cook you a meal and turn on your coffee and all that kind of stuff?
With a condition that you don't ask the maid on Shabbat to cook for you or to do work for you on Shabbat. You can tell your maid, or at Sharei Tefillah, we can tell our custodian, Luis, ahead of time what he's expected to do on Shabbat. So the ideal is that people working in the kitchen on Shabbat to prepare the Kiddush don't tell Luis to turn on the oven on Shabbat, but rather he knew ahead of time that the ovens are going to be needed in the kitchen on Shabbat to warm up the food, and he does it by himself automatically. Or if for some reason the air conditioning doesn't turn on in the sanctuary on Shabbat in the summertime, Luis will know by himself to turn on the air conditioning. I was what you even so it's this is the category of like Elvis Presley or Governor Mario Cuomo being what's called a Shabbos goy, right? So they were famously Shabbos goys. I think General Colin Powell was a Shabbos goy also. So in other words, they knew that Elvis Presley in Memphis and Mario Cuomo in the Bronx or wherever it was in New York City, they famously told stories of their Jewish neighbors who had asked them, could you agree to like turn on our ovens or turn off our ovens on Shabbat every week? Just come in when you can to do this. So you can't ask them on Shabbat because that's as if you're doing it yourself. But you can ask ahead of time. It's like setting a timer. So, and the maid or the Shabbos goy is like a human live timer. Okay, so those aspects are okay. So, so using a timer is okay. And most in the Orthodox world will do that. I think I've also heard people in the Orthodox world who are avid baseball or sports fans and will set their TV on a timer as well so that they can watch the game. Or maybe there was some, maybe they wanted to watch the coronation of King Charles III, which happened on Shabbat. So some people could have set their TV. You either set it on a timer or you have it on before Shabbat and leave it on all of Shabbat and don't turn it off until Shabbat is over. Okay, so that's how in the Orthodox world, electricity can be used on Shabbat with a timer. Now, the added layer to this that is unique about Israel and in relation to the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox who might consider using electricity on Shabbat is the following. So the government ministers are talking about this controversial plan of building electricity storage sites. Why would they do this? But first, let's get to this. According to the report, the estimated cost of the project is 100 million shekels, or $27 million. Has said the energy minister has said the move would not increase electricity tariffs for the general public. Okay, so this project, this 100 million shekel project, is to build electricity storage units. Why? Okay, many in the ultra-Orthodox community are against the delivery of electricity from Friday night until Saturday night, saying that even if the electricity in their homes is controlled by a timer, there are Jews working at the power stations that produce the electricity on the Sabbath. As a result, many Haredi Jews run their own generators on Shabbat to avoid electricity from the national grid. Okay, so here's the thing. One may not benefit from work being done for you on Shabbat. So if the maid, no, let me say it this way. So you can benefit from a non-Jew doing work from you on Shabbat. That's the Shabbos goy or the maid or the custodian in the synagogue. But a Jew, you cannot have a Jew do that work for you before Shabbat, on Shabbat. Okay, so you can't ask ahead of time even a Jew to drive you to synagogue or to drive you anywhere on Shabbat, because a Jew is not supposed to do work. So even though the Jew who would drive for you doesn't care about Shabbat the way you do, right? So the Jew would cook on Shabbat or would drive on Shabbat, and it would do it anyway. And whether you asked him to or not, you are not allowed to ask that Jew to do it for you. So you can't ask the Jew to do it for you, and you can't benefit even after the fact from a Jew having done work on Shabbat and you take advantage of it. Okay, so that's the problem with living in the Jewish state of Israel is that Jews work on Shabbat. It's the infrastructure that requires a state to function and a society to function is the electric grid, are the hospitals, are the sewers, right? The everything that we take for granted, right, is overseen in some kind of headquarters somewhere, right? The water flows through our pipe thanks to the water company here, and it's clean because the sewage system or the water filtration system is constantly working. Well, there are people running that or supervising it 24/7, and ambulances run because EMTs are working 24/7, right? So they're Jewish. So that's a different issue, right? Saving a life. So you have Orthodox Jews working in hospitals on Shabbat and who are EMTs on Shabbat because of saving a life. So that's not a question. But it's the other stuff. Can you just be on a police force? Can you be in the army? Can you do all this infrastructure on Shabbat? So most Orthodox Jews say yes. It's for the survival of the state of Israel. A state cannot function without the infrastructure functioning, and the fact that it lives in a dangerous neighborhood, enemies at the door. If they see that the infrastructure isn't working, then that's an opportunity to take advantage and strike. So it's two reasons why the infrastructure needs to function on Shabbat: to protect the citizens of Israel from potential attack from enemies, and also just to protect the people of Israel from themselves, that you need to have things working on Shabbat. But the ultra-Orthodox don't want to use electricity that has been created by Jews on Shabbat. So what they do instead is, as a result, many Haredi Jews run their own generators on Shabbat to avoid electricity from the national grid. So that's all we need to know from the article. I'm going to stop sharing and just understand this. What's wrong with running a generator on Shabbat? There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a waste. It's a waste of electricity, and some of them are operated by gasoline. So it's a waste of gasoline too. So therefore, it pollutes. So you have, I had no idea that this was something that was an issue within Israel. That like in Bnei Brak or Mea Shearim, you'd have this din. If you've heard a generator, it's pretty loud. So if you have all these generators running in the neighborhood, it's unbelievable how loud the neighborhood would be. Now I haven't walked through Mea Shearim. Have I ever walked through Mea Shearim on Shabbat? I don't think I have. So I've never in my life walked through an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Israel on Shabbat. Now I wonder though, so this wouldn't be an issue in America because the general assumption is that Jews are not working for the electric company. That's not something that Jews generally do. So I think that this is not the case in Borough Park or in Muncie, right? So I don't think people there are running generators on Shabbat because they don't want to use electricity that has been produced by Jews, because the assumption is that Jews are not working for Con Ed in New York City. Whereas in Israel, the assumption is that Jews are working that. So the idea of building these electricity storage units is that you have, imagine a huge battery that would then be accessed by the electrical system of Bnei Brak or Mea Shearim or any other ultra-Orthodox neighborhood. So that particular neighborhood can shift their wires to be connected to this big electric storage unit also known as a battery, let's say, just for understanding this, be connected to this battery that would then, that's the source of the power that you are using on Shabbat if you have your things set on a timer. And then you can be safe, rest assured that no Jew has been involved in that production of that electricity that you are using then on Shabbat. Okay, so it's a creative system, and we could say, wow, look how innovative these Jews are to come up with a way to allow the ultra-Orthodox to use electricity on Shabbat. Now, the critics of this are the critics of anything that makes that the government will be doing and spending money to make the life of the ultra-Orthodox easier, with then the implication that the government is not spending equal money to make the life of secular Jews easier, or Arabs easier, or any other minority segment of the Israeli population, right? So the critics of these moves are the critics of the Israeli government in general right now, the inordinate influence that the ultra-Orthodox now have in the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So this article about the electric storage units is just another in the series of articles about how this can be a critique of the government itself, right? Because there have been other things, like on Passover, a law was passed that hospitals would be allowed to forbid chametz from entering the hospital, right? And that hospital grounds, and that security guards then could be authorized to prevent people from coming in with chametz into the hospital. So again, so that's okay if you're Orthodox. Wow, it's great to be in Israel because everything is geared to me to make my life as an Orthodox Jew so easy in Israel today. But what if you're an Israeli Arab and you're coming with food to help feed yourself while you're sitting with your Arab relative who's a patient in the hospital, and you need to eat, and you're just bringing food from home, not thinking about how it's going to impact anybody else. So the Israeli Arab should be allowed to bring their own food so that they can take care of their relative who's in the hospital. So, and how would the chametz of the Israeli Arab impact the Orthodox Jew who might be even sharing a room with that Arab? What would that impact the ultra-Orthodox Jew in any way at all? It's not their chametz, so you're not violating any commandment of having chametz because it's not yours. And it's going to be in another part of the room, and there's no way that chametz is going to become integrated with your kosher for Passover food. So it's this. So that's my take on the chametz in the hospitals on Passover. But it's just another example of how the undue influence that the ultra-Orthodox have on setting standards, regulations, and laws in Israel today. And so the idea that the Israeli electric company would be spending 100 million shekels in order to make Shabbos easier for the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox who are the ultra-Orthodox are like 10% of the Israeli population. I'm not saying observance. Are they 10%? Maybe they're 20% of the Israeli society. There are 10 million people in Israel today. So 5 million of them are, no, that's half. What, 2 million? That's why I'm a rabbi and not an accountant. That 2 million of them are ultra-Orthodox. Yes, Israel should take care of all of its citizens and all its minorities, but it shouldn't do that at the expense of any one minority over the other. So that's that's what I wanted to share today. So I'm not sure what the follow-up has been about that electric grid, because the Gaza operation happened in between, and it just ended yesterday. So maybe it'll come up again next week in the cabinet to approve this measure. But again, it's another reason for people to protest in the Israeli streets about the not just about the judicial overhaul, but also about the undue influence that the ultra-Orthodox have on Israeli society. Okay, yes, Jules.
You said in talking that there's an assumption in the United States that Jews are not employed by the electric company.
Yeah.
And who made the assumption? You see, every time I listen to this, and I do it with respect, not with any disrespect.
Yeah.
I ask myself, yes, I'm a lawyer. Yes, I understand what laws are. But what I hear on this end is every time something comes up that bothers someone enough that they can figure out a way to go through it. You have an error where you block off parts of the street. So
Right.
on Shabbos, you can wheel your perambulators up and
Right.
down with your children. You
Right.
can take them to shul.
Yep.
And that was created, and I guarantee you there must have been 100 rabbis who sat down on Shabbos or off of Shabbos and figured out a way to overcome that.
I understand, Jules.
It's like everything else that I keep hearing, and it bothers me.
I hear you loud and clear, and yes, for the challenge of these loopholes is that it makes the whole legal system a laughingstock, and that it means then that people will not take the system seriously. If only it means that you're looking for ways around things, right? So the more that you can work your way around it, the less you are observing the law in general, and the less you are taking the law seriously, okay? So I understand that threat completely, and so that's why, I don't use timers on Shabbat. I do use electricity, and I would think that a timer would go against really what the whole purpose of staying away from electricity is. So it's a game 7. Big deal. You can record it if you really care about it and watch it later. There's nothing so important that the game 7 of a playoff is more important than Shabbos itself. Okay, and this, as a diehard sports fan like myself, that's what I would say. That Shabbos supersedes anything else, and that's the whole point. That Shabbos is supposed to help you stay away from distractions that normally are important to you during the week, and that it shifts your focus to something more important. So I totally agree with that. And however, there are certain times that you have to weigh your Shabbos observance with how it impacts other people in your family. So part of Shabbos is to celebrate Shabbos with your family, and going to shul on Shabbos is important. Going to a friend's house or a relative's house for Shabbos dinner or Shabbos lunch is important. So how can you do it if you can't get your kids there easily, right? There are only 2 parents, and you might have 3 kids under the age of 4 who might not be able to walk. And so each parent can carry 1, but what are you going to do with the 3rd one? Right? So, and you could carry, but how long can you carry for? How many blocks can you carry for? So if you want to enhance the community celebration of Shabbos, with people being able to share Shabbos with each other, not just carrying their children, but carrying food, right? So you could have dinner at your parents' house or your friend's house, and you're volunteering to bring the bottle of wine, or you're bringing dessert, or you're bringing a salad. You have to be able to carry that. So you need an eruv in order this fence that the rabbis came up with as a way to enhance Shabbat. So the loophole is there to allow as many people as possible to observe Shabbos. Now, there could be some who would still be ultra religious who would still not want to carry anything on Shabbat, and somehow would figure out a way of not carrying, even though carrying would be allowed if there's an eruv. We have an eruv here in Olney, right? And it happens to go down, the shul is within the eruv, and just by chance, and the boundary of the eruv happens to be the edge of the service road, not the sidewalk side of the service road, but the shul side of the service road of Georgia Avenue. So I'm always thinking I would carry on, like I carry an umbrella on Shabbat, and I would carry my tallis on Shabbat if I needed to. So I don't have a problem with carrying little things like that. But I sometimes think, how far away from the edge of the eruv should I be where carrying would not be permitted anymore, right? So with the loophole, you then think even more nuanced about the eruv itself and other things like that. So Jules, what I'm saying by all this is that the beauty of a legal system is that the beauty of the Jewish religious system is that the rabbis developed it with the loopholes in order to allow as many people as possible to have the opportunity to observe and to experience the beauty of Shabbat, the beauty of the holiday, or the beauty of Passover, with the selling of chametz, because the rabbis knew that not everybody was going to be in the category of a rabbi in terms of their commitment to Jewish law. And so the average Jew who might say, you know what, this is too hard for me, I'm not going to do it at all. The rabbi said, we don't want Jews to be saying that. We don't want Jews to give up because the Jewish legal system is just too hard to manage and incorporate into their life. So we need to make the system in such a way that as many people as possible will do it. Now, I could still argue that even the way the conservative movement understands Jewish law could be a turnoff for people. And I understand that completely. Unless you are born into it, or really have such devotion that you're coming to it late at life and you want to adopt these things, it takes a long time to adopt a new kind of behavior to make it be routine. So for me, it's already routine how I shop in the supermarket, knowing how to look for the kosher symbols on the products that I buy. But if you're new to that and you've never done that before, it could be overwhelming. You have to learn what the symbols are, and you have to learn whether some products don't have a symbol, whether it's still kosher or not. All these things, there's lots of things to learn as you are converting to Judaism or growing in your Judaism, and so it takes a lot to do it. So the Jewish legal system is an overwhelming system. So I always say to people who convert that I prefer to see conversion to Judaism as stepping into the shallow end of the pool as opposed to diving off the high dive, right? So that Judaism should be understood, and growing in your Judaism is stepping in through the shallow end, getting used to the water, learning how to swim, being comfortable in swimming so that you can tread water in deep water, and you're confident in your swimming strength and swimming skills, that you're then willing to jump off the high dive and know that nothing's going to happen to you, and that then it'll be an enjoyable experience. So that's how I encourage people who convert to Judaism to do this, not not to see it as jumping off the high dive, and you'll never do that in your life, but rather, do it slow and steady, and you'll see it as an enjoyable experience. Yes, Lori.
Yeah, I was just curious, in Israel, how many Orthodox, or if you know, or mainstream modern, and how would they relate to this issue?
So all Orthodox around the world do not use electricity on Shabbat unless they use timers. So they could put timers to their lamps. In other words, you have a lamp. You have a lamp in your living room or your family room, and instead of turning it on Shabbat to read a book or whatever, you put a timer on, and you set the timer to you have it to turn off at 11 o'clock at night, and then it'll turn back on at 10 o'clock the next morning, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's how most Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I was wondering about was the idea of benefiting from other Jews working for the electric company.
I don't think so.
There
So
wouldn't be an
the issue is the secondary nature of it, right? In other words, right, is it by opening a refrigerator and the light goes on, is that really necessary to turn off that light bulb? Because your intention of opening the refrigerator is not to read a book by the light of the open door of the refrigerator, right? You're not opening the refrigerator in order to use the light. You're opening the refrigerator in order to get something out of it or to put something in it. The light having turned on is a secondary feature.
Okay.
So for some Orthodox, it's still, even though it's secondary, it's a violation. Some other people would say, no, it's not a violation. So
this proposal wouldn't garnish support from a mainstream Orthodox community. That's not
right. The mainstream Orthodox do not use generators. That's as far as I know.
Yeah.
It's only in the ultra-Orthodox world that take matters of Jewish law to the extreme. And sometimes it's a matter of trying to find the next thing that they should be concerned about. That's right. I used to get a magazine, I don't know if it's still published, called Kashrus magazine. I would pronounce the word kashrut, but in old-fashioned Hebrew, it's kashrus, and that's how it's spelled in English. Kashrus was a magazine published in Brooklyn, and it would list. I would get this. I don't think it just was coming in the mail to Sharei Tefillah, to maybe it came to Rabbi Halpern, and then, this was interesting. So I actually had them change the name to keep sending it to me. And so I remember one feature on the Passover edition was a centerfold in which it had different size squares, and the different size square was according to a different rabbi about how big a piece of a matzah you should be eating to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah when you say the bracha for the first time at the Seder, right? So you say hamotzi for eating matzah, but then there's another bracha just for the commandment of eating matzah, al achilat matzah. So what's the size matzah what's the size square that you need to eat to fulfill that? So there are different outlines on this plain piece of paper that said that you can match up your square to know how much of it you need to eat. So that for me is what the ultra Orthodox are all about. Knowing the size of the square and how big a piece of matzah you should be eating to fulfill the mitzvah. So in terms of the modern Orthodox in Israel, I don't know what the percentages are. So Barbara and then Gabe.
I just wanted to say that one time when I was in Israel, I had visited this residential facility with children of special needs.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they had a washing machine that when it completed its cycle, it automatically went into the dryer.
Okay.
And they used to, one of the things they used to do was, because they had used it a lot, just before Shabbos, they were able to fill it up and do a cycle.
Right.
so that it should run.
Yes. Yeah, so you
And,
can
and,
do,
and then they would go and they would fold the clothes afterward
right.
on Shabbos.
Right, yeah, well, so I don't know if folding laundry is okay to do on Shabbat, but you can start something, you can start cooking before Shabbat. It's like cholent, right? So cholent is this stew that cooks over Shabbat, and the only way you're allowed to have it is if most of the cooking of the cholent has happened already, like the meat that's in the cholent has already mostly cooked before Shabbos begins. If that happens, then it could stay at this low temperature overnight until you're ready for lunch. And it's something like, so you can start something before Shabbat and let it finish on Shabbat. Gabe.
What are the prospects of the overrepresented interests of the ultra Orthodox in Israel waning at some point, or is it going to take a change in the government?
So the problem is that we had a government before this one, which was Lapid, Gantz, and Bennett, that had a coalition that did not have the ultra Orthodox in it, but it survived. It had only like a 1 seat or 2 seat at most majority. So if they were to bring up anything, which they had thought about doing, like saying that the draft in the Israeli army, that the ultra Orthodox should no longer be exempt. So that did not pass because there were just not enough. Even with that majority, there are some members of their own coalition that were not in favor of voting in completely that exemption or anything else. Like they also talked about civil marriage in Israel, that there should be allowed, the 2 people should be allowed to get married in Israel outside of the religious system. You should be able to go to a court, that some say in Israel, that you should be able to go to a court like you can here in Rockville. 2 people want to get married, you go to Rockville and you arrange an appointment, and you can even have them officially marry you if you make the appointment ahead of time, right? So it's just that's how people can get married in America. Just go to the county courthouse to do that. You can't do that in Israel. If you're Jewish, you have to be married by a rabbi. If you're Muslim, you have to be married by an imam. If you're Christian, you got to be married by a priest, etc. It's just the way it is in Israel. And so some people are not religious, don't want that. So they do Israel recognizes marriages from outside of Israel. So a lot of Israelis go to Cyprus and get married in Cyprus, get their marriage license there, come back to Israel. They have a marriage license. They're recognized as married. So they want to change that. So that they haven't been able to do that. The ultra Orthodox forbid it. So they most governments in the history of Israel have had representation from the ultra Orthodox parties. So it'll be a very long time, if ever, if the ultra Orthodox no longer, just the 20% at most of the Israeli population will no longer have that much influence. I don't know when that will ever happen. Okay, it's past 12 o'clock. Thank you all for being here today, Jews in the News. Next week will be our last session. I don't have a topic yet, but next week will be our last session for the year for Jews in the News, and we'll start up again in September.
Okay.
Have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.